dark side. Light this bitch up.
What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. It has been a while since we have done a show that circumnavigates around the dossier known as the Klondike Papers. But if you're like me, and you've read the Klondike Papers, and you feel like you need a secret decoder ring to find all these stories, you're not alone. But today, we have a guest who really needs no introduction. I'll give him one anyways. He is the host of a show that's going to be debuting on the Crier Media Network in, I think, about 2 weeks. Finally, it's been a long time coming. And that show is called The Fix. And he is with us today to unearth one of the craziest stories inside that dossier. And it is so crazy that I am a little bit tentative to even intro it. So instead, let's welcome to the show my friend and yours. His name is David Wallace. David, how are you, buddy?
Cheers.
So, listen, the Klondike Papers are still kind of lingering around, and the interesting thing about it, and I've said this before, the way that it was released, it was like a jigsaw puzzle that you had to sort of understand what the final picture in the assembled puzzle looked like in order to find the pieces to create little puzzles that turned out to be the stories that were inside the dossier. And it's kind of a blessing in disguise in a lot of ways, because there are still stories that are coming out of the Klondike Papers. And tonight we have one of them. And honestly, like, when you sent it to me, I was looking at it. I read it over. It's like a 20-page sort of section of the Klondike Papers assembled from the communications between yourself and others. And I read it, and I was like, this is crazy. This is one of the craziest stories I've ever heard, to the point where I'm like, I'm not even sure if I understand it yet. So let's start the show as if I am deaf, dumb, and blind, and you tell us what story it is that we are talking about tonight.
Well, it's the time I decided that it might be a little more convenient to do some of this work if I had my own bank. So an opportunity presented itself at an opportune time when I was engaged on another job in Alberta. And from that point forward, the pursuit of a bank in Turks took place.
Okay. Now, Turks and Caicos, is that a tax sheltered area? Is that like a Cayman Islands type place?
It's a very friendly place.
Okay. Now, what was the purpose of trying? Because basically you were trying to put the players together in order to purchase this bank that was being liquidated, correct?
That's correct. It was actually the National Bank charter that had come up, which was even better. It gives that air of legitimacy. One of the biggest problems I'd had over the decades when I would have opportunities was my clients had no place to, how do you say it? No place to move their funny money in and out. Now I'd found some workarounds, and the last one I'd had was a crazy European who operated off of a old Navy vessel, I believe, from the Soviet Union until he got blown up by some pirates. So this was, I thought, the better way to go.
Well, only you would have a story where the aside was some guy got blown up by pirates.
But he lived. Just his boat.
Of course he did.
His money.
Yeah.
Some people, I guess. But I wasn't there. But a bank seemed really appealing. And when I ran it past certain people in the community, they loved the idea as well. When I was being utilized for a source as foreign intelligence by the Horsemen, it piqued their interest, and from there I had a firm ability to move forward to purchase the bank charter.
Okay. And how were you going to go about purchasing the bank?
Well, I was going to use some of the RCMP's money as well. I'm sure they would find it somewhere. They were extremely interested in exchange for um, intelligence, foreign sources of intelligence. This wasn't actionable intelligence. The problem was the RCMP had confided in me that they had, for a very long time, become extremely concerned about the transparency and lack of uh, cooperation with CSIS. They believed that what they were getting, what they were putting in the hopper, so to speak, to go up to CSIS, was being thrown in the wastebasket, and our foreign intelligence had fallen on its ass. They wanted their own eyes and ears. So, in exchange for providing that, they were interested in providing me with financing.
So did they want to be involved in this bank purchase where funny money would be parked in order to keep an eye on the people who had the funny money?
They wanted to have this as an intelligence outpost simply because they were extremely concerned with other unrelated matters. Because, again, this is what happens. All this stuff goes into a hopper. There are file names, there are code names, there are everything is done to ensure the source's confidentiality and anonymity. Um, they wanted the ability to gather strong intelligence because the intelligence that they were gathering was indicating to them that we were under attack by foreign governments, and so we were trying to open up another set of eye and ears for our country.
Okay, recap what you just said and put it in lay terms. You wanted to facilitate the purchase of a bank in Turks and Caicos
Yes.
in order for two things to happen. One is so that clients of yours could park their money there.
Hmm.
And then the second prong would be so that the RCMP could have an outpost so that they could monitor intelligence that they could trust more than the intelligence that they were receiving at the time.
Absolutely.
How does that math work? Like how is it that those two entities, your clients and the RCMP, can be in bed together at the
Oh,
same
they're
time?
all in bed together. I mean, this is how things get done. Criminals are allowed to operate on our shores 24/7, 365. It just depends which criminals and what intelligence value they may have to this country. It works the same way in all countries.
Okay. Now, how did the deal was progressing?
Yes.
Okay, and give me an idea. Listen, just want to tell my audience, especially the people that are watching, I have the dossier in front of me. I didn't have time to properly redact it. Okay, because I don't want to like put anyone on blast. Especially there are certain key individuals that that I know personally, even that I just don't want to like make their life a little bit more difficult. We will. I will release an article in the in the coming 2 or 3 days that will include redacted versions of the communications that are in the Klondike Papers pertaining to this story. Now, give me the process. What was the process like? Who did you try to get the money from? Who was in Turks and Caicos facilitating the deal? And before it goes awry, just tell me how it progressed when things were still looking good.
Okay. See, it's important to realize that everybody had their own agenda, and I had my own, obviously. The
What
people
was
who
what
were
was your
involved,
agenda so people know?
my agenda was to open the bank, have people put their money in, gather intelligence. That intelligence would be flipped to the Canadian government via the RCMP.
Hmm.
And it
And
was
to make
going to
money.
be a very unique relationship, but
But you wanted to make money too, right? Like I don't want to make it seem like, you were just like the Robin Hood of intelligence, right? Like
well, I like to take the money, but I like to give it away. I mean, if you've got the financial records in the Klondike Papers, it's pretty clear. It all started, and this is a little bit convoluted, but it all started um, during the Patrick Brown takedown. That was a foreign assisted um, takedown. People keep looking at the Klondike Papers and adding 1+1, coming up with 2, they believe that Russian government interests had a hand in taking down Patrick Brown. That's not true. It wasn't the Russians who helped take him down. In fact, they were quite upset. They were developing. This is, again, keep in mind, pre-COVID, pre-sanctions. So there's nothing untoward at this point that I'm suggesting.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that they viewed Brown as a moderate. Also, they viewed him as an avenue where maybe reciprocal trade, things of this nature could take place. So it was not advantageous for Russia to assist in Brown's takedown. The problem was the casinos that were laundering money, which were Brown's ultimate downfall, Great Canadian Gaming, owned at the time by Bloomberg Sen, which is Sanjay Sen and Mulrooney's son-in-law. And that company was owned almost wholly by Burgundy Asset Management, which is the Chen.
And Carolyn Mulrooney was also an employee there, correct?
Well, yeah. And here's the thing. And Brian's Burgundy Asset Management at the time owned the whole shooting match. But the money from Great Canadian Gaming was going through Chinese gangs. And a lot of this stuff was going straight back to Beijing. You see, that was where the problem lied. It was a casino turf war. You got Russian interest and the other regular mafia, criminal element, casino money. And now you got the big Chinese running everything through their triads and the gangs, everybody who they have in a leash. I mean, no matter how big and bad you are, you got to kick back to the dragon. That's how it works.
And a lot of this was detailed in Sam Cooper's book, Willful Blindness.
Absolutely. You see, at the time, I was contacted by a gentleman named Gord Brown. You know who Gord was. Gord was the MP for Granville Leeds, I believe it was. He also chaired the Intelligence Committee that was tasked with keeping Canadian politicians safe. Gord and I became acquainted during the Brown thing, and we got involved in my concerns, and Gord asked me to plug some people in Moscow. I took him to the expat bar, a place called Papa's Pizza, which is owned by a Canadian. I got him in the circle, eyes and ears. This was to gather information, but we had a real problem, and that problem was coming from the People's Republic of China. Gord Brown was a hero. He kept Canadians safe, whether they were liberals, whether they were conservatives, whether they were New Democrats. It was his job to make sure that people like the Tony Clement situation, or blackmail or things of that nature, or threats of violence against our Canadian politicians were to take place. It was Gord's job quietly to make sure that our intelligence committees and our policing bodies neutralized that threat. And to tell you the truth, since the day Gord has died, we've been open season. Open season. But I made a promise, and I followed those threads all the way to Alberta, and spent years of my life trying to put this together. We found the initial thread after it was passed to a Canadian fixer, war rooms, comm guy. Didn't even know he was taking it from. Didn't know that he was betraying his own country. And took that crap to Michael Cook at the Star, who was the editor. Who, they wouldn't run it, their lawyers. Ended up in CTV and Lisa LaFlemme, and off to the races. Down goes Brown, and in goes the new puppet, Doug Ford.
Okay, so just so listeners aren't confused, what about the Ford premiership? How is that one of the first dominoes on the Turks and Caicos Bank?
Well, when all this was going down, a lot of foreign cash started flowing in, cash that didn't have any real origin. A lot of that cash came through financial institutions, Mennonites, things of that nature, whatever the hell you want to call them, Hutterites, religious organizations like the Brethren. That money was being washed constantly through these action committees that they were putting together. A lot of that money that was being washed was actually coming from places like Russia and China, and extremist groups that were being funded. These were operations against our country by foreign actors. This is big time stuff. During the course of this, I became acquainted also with a Bud Cummins, former district attorney, I believe he was, for the DOJ. That was released about Mr. Cummings. Mr. Cummings worked for Mr. Giuliani, which is how I made the acquaintance of Michael Yerkovich, who had required some help due to an argument with a gangster, the biggest gangster in the world, a gentleman named Ihor Kolomoisky.
Okay, wait.
Alleged gangster.
Let me stop you right there, because you know this shit inside out. But if the listener is joining us, he's be like, what? Michael Cook, Yerkovich, Kolomoisky, what's going on here? So let's try to simplify it for all the kids, right?
There's a lot of moving parts, but. Yeah.
So the Russian money is coming in, and it's coming in through things like developers. It's getting washed allegedly in certain communities and casinos and things like that.
Yeah, we're building highways, and I mean, wow, Ontario Place, which, don't get me wrong, is going to turn into one giant honeypot of a casino, which I've told everybody was the plan since 2018.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I remember that. I remember that being one of the big things that that didn't come out of the Patrick Brown story, was that was eventually going to happen.
No, it was, this was all about money, and it was all about foreign influence, and it was since day one, and it's going on now. Gord was just about to take action. Gord had that information I know that Gord Brown gathered was forwarded to CSIS, and there was a individual in the sitting government who was passing along information, sensitive information, to an individual in Alberta, and that information was going straight back to Communist China.
Wow.
And that individual is still unknowingly passing along information because it's going through a conduit. That individual in government isn't guilty themselves.
He's a useful idiot.
He's a useful idiot who is passing on the information in confidence to a family member during private discussions, which he believes is safe.
Okay. Let's get back to Michael Yerkovich. Who is he, and what's his role? Here's a picture of him. Who is he, and what's his role in all of this? Hold on. Let me be specific so that the listeners aren't confused. Again, the topic is you were helping to facilitate the purchase of a bank in Turks and Caicos that was being liquidated for the purpose of being able to park the money for some of your clients, and also so that the RCMP would have an outpost to collect intelligence. How does Michael Yerkovich fit in, and who is he?
Michael Yerkovich fits in because he had a big pile of money that he wanted to put into play by buying Colt rifles from Canada, some other defense manufacturers, a Russian hockey team, you name it. Michael had owned infrastructure, energy infrastructure in the Ukraine, which he had ultimately come into dispute with the Ihor Kolomoisky over, and had hired me to introduce him to some people who could help him retrieve his property. During the course of this, Mr. Yerkovich expressed interest, and I offered him the services of a potential bank, which he was willing to partially finance to do his deals.
Okay. And Yerkovich is a dual citizen between Ukrainian and Canadian, isn't he?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And so, Mike, so Yerkovich says, I'm interested. He was going to put, what, 50 million in?
Yeah, something like that. It changed every couple of days, how much he'd put in. It's all in the emails.
Okay. And again, I will post the pieces of the Klondike Papers that pertain to this story in a subsequent article in the next couple of days. Okay, so now you're at the point where you have the bank. It's being liquidated. You have a potential buyer, right?
Yes.
Now, give me the cake. Like what happened after that? Because ultimately this purchase didn't go through.
No, we were there. It was we were just about to take it across the finish line. And during the course of this, I've picked up a side job as a favor. Somebody called me and asked me if I would speak with Gerald Chapor, and the rest is history. Mr. Richard Marsh, Once I told him that he needed to speak with the RCMP and gave him the names, and it became public when Richard Marsh released a recorded phone call between myself and his friend Karat Singh, Dr. Karat Singh in Edmonton, about the kidnapping attempt. The RCMP dropped everything.
Okay, so I
instantly.
just want to translate what you just said. So the deal is possible to go through, but then the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church asked you to basically, allegedly, what essentially amounts to kidnapping, allegedly. That
Well, it was to locate, and then it evolved into places I wasn't willing to go.
right. And when you informed the RCMP about this, and I think it was you and Nathan Jacobson that worked together on informing the RCMP, the RCMP then just mysteriously decided to back out of the bank deal.
I was told by my guy, shit's hit the fan. I don't know who this Marsh is. I don't know what it means. I don't know who you pissed off, but this is done. It's all being shut down. I'm sorry.
Now, so that is interesting because every time I think of something that happens that where the brethren get involved and then all of a sudden authorities stop doing their job or at least stop going down whatever path they were going. In this particular case, you say that they were going to be involved in this bank so that they could use that as an intelligence outpost. But then you decide to sort of let the RCMP know, hey, this cult, the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, is asking me to basically take another human being and hand him over. And there's no actual criminal activity from this human being, even though former Prime Minister Stephen Harper's attorney and the former General Counsel of the Conservative Party of Canada, Gerald Shapour, had told you that Richard Marsh was wanted, basically. Essentially, there was warrants out for his arrest, which turned out not to be true. Now, are we to glean from this that Gerald Shapour is the power behind that circumstance and behind the RCMP backing out? Because when we talk about the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church and we talk about how, like in this particular case, it is really interesting that once you mention, what the Plymouth Brethren wanted you to do and brought that to the RCMP, that the RCMP would back out of this totally different thing. Is that Gerald Shapour's fingerprints or is that something else, you think?
That's whoever it was, they were a heavy weight. I mean, it was because when I first brought it up, they said, "Yeah, absolutely, we'll contact Marsh," and then it wasn't. They said they'd run it up the flagpole. It wasn't more than 2 hours later that I got the phone call that it was done, just like that.
Why was the RCMP so important for this deal? If Yerkovich was ready to fork over tens of millions of dollars for the bank,
The important component was that it served a very needed purpose. We're wide open right now. We're defenseless. We do not have a united intelligence network that is acting in best interest of Canadians. This is just a fact. Gord suspected it. The RCMP not only suspects it, they know it. We are in trouble. We are blind. We are not getting information. We are not getting real active intelligence. We're getting bullshit. And we're getting people bearing things. And it was the right thing to do. You can make money and try to do the right thing too. Look, what difference does it make if these guys are moving money, washing cash? Look, this is how the game is played. The RCMP, I'm sure, figured it's better to know what is going on within our own borders, or potentially will go on, or what the people within our own borders are doing on the international stage, than it is to be blind. And it's vital. I mean, the RCMP probably runs a lot of operations that I'm not aware of. I know a few that I was, where friendly banks can come in really handy. This is no way unique.
do you think that So was the idea that the RCMP's involvement would act as like a protective veneer for
Of
the
course.
people? Okay.
I mean, they're not going to be publicly acknowledged as partners, but
Right.
it also acts as a shield, because if you're doing something, you're monitoring. I mean, they're not going to pop you, not until it suits their purpose. But that wasn't the objective of the operation. It was to Watch and wait, gather.
Would the intelligence that the RCMP was hoping to gather a result of the people like the Yerkoviches of the world who would be involved in the bank? Like, would they even know that the RCMP was involved? Would someone like Yerkovich have known?
No, not at all. The only person who was really in possession of all the facts during the deal's formation was me, of course. I mean, everybody else is looking at it as a money making opportunity. And to be fair to them, there's nothing illegal about buying a bank charter. You
Right.
can see through some of the communications, the proposed individual to run it was looking to do everything on the up and up, strictly legal. And he would have until I fired him and got rid of him, replaced him with somebody to do whatever the hell I wanted him to do.
Well, I've never seen David Wallace Power Trip, but we just
Well,
got a small glimpse.
I had no interest in owning a bank. I had interest in having access to a bank.
Right. Give me there's an Alberta angle to this, isn't there?
Yes,
And it has to do with the Nenshi job.
yes, it does.
So the Nenshi job, just to remind people, David was and I'm not going to name these people because there's subsequent lawsuits that have happened since the first time that we talked about this on this podcast. But there were people that were hoping that you could facilitate foreign money coming in and having Nenshi sort of go along with foreign money coming in, funding developers in the city of Calgary. And then Nenshi didn't take the bait, and then that job was killed. What did that do to this situation?
Well, it made it difficult because some of the people involved in trying to put together other deals had animosity with each other, of course, and it had the potential to upset everybody's apple cart. You had a lot of moving parts. You had the disputes within this group of people about the UCP identity theft.
Mhm.
You had disputes with people on a personal issue, i.e., the Nenshi job. It made operating extremely difficult. So peace proposals were put together, and of course, it just blew up further. That's how they figured in. It was supposed to be let's everybody put down our swords and get along for the cause, so to speak.
Okay. Is there a reason why Yerkovich decided not to go through with purchasing the bank?
Oh, Yerkovich was all for it, but I mean, if you look inside the Klondike Papers and the documents, you see by that point, unbeknownst to us, Yerkovich was communicating directly with Russian officials, the
Right.
personal secretary for Deputy Prime Minister Chernyshchenko, and requesting assistance in killing Ihor Kolomoisky and Zelensky in the Ukraine. This is prior to the war, of course, in 2019, 2020. But those emails are there where he's actually asking for Russian government assistance in the assassination of a foreign national. I mean, this guy was all kinds of wrong for me.
Okay. Give me
Not to mention, he wanted me to hack off Nathan Jacobson's leg and arm, bring it to him before lunch, or
yeah,
some such thing.
that was the craziest thing ever in the Klondike Papers. Okay, but I think we need to know who this man is. Can you explain who Igor Kolomoisky is for people at home who have never heard of this person?
He's probably the most powerful man in the Ukraine. He owns the television network and pretty much everything else of worth and value in the Ukraine. He is the gentleman that Michael Yerkovich came into dispute with over his power plant. Yerkovich had tried to jack the price on an existing contract and ruffled some feathers. So Mr. Kolomoisky just shut off his power plant, which was hooked into Mr. Kolomoisky's facility instead of the main grid. So that's how Mr. Yerkovich came into my sphere to try to mediate the dispute between these two. And during the course of that, I used Donald Trump's lawyers, Rudy Giuliani and Bud Cummins, to also try to assist in that matter.
Okay, and so I also want people to understand that as far as most geopolitical or whatever you want to call it experts go, Kolomoisky was largely responsible for the stratospheric rise of this man, President Zelensky of Ukraine. How did that happen? How did this man, Igor Kolomoisky, bring up Zelensky and basically kind of like hand him power? No?
Well, these things kind of happen, right? It's look.
Don't be
Here's the
coy.
problem. and
Don't
it's
be coy, David. Don't be
no.
coy.
I mean, this is the problem with our world right now, and it's probably going to be the driving principle behind the fix, where we not just talk about what's taking place, but what is taking place right now, real time. We break down the headlines and we undo the spin and say, this is the situation. These are the players. This is the game. And this is what is really happening, in our opinion, and
Mhm.
provide um, some expert opinions from other people we know to try to support that or disprove it. Whatever. Debate is good. But the problem with this world is this: people see elected leaders and believe that they're actually running everything. That's not how it works. And I don't mean any grand conspiracy. Governments are run by the bureaucracy, the ingrained bureaucracy.
Mhm.
You have people who don't change addresses every 4 to 5 years.
Right.
They work for their entire adult lives until they retire. Those are the people that have been corrupted. Why? Because those are the people you go after. Do you think the Russian government, the Chinese government, do you think their intelligence operatives are wasting their time with high level politicians or MPs? It's stupid. It's counterproductive. You have eyes on. They go after the civil servants. They go after the government that does not leave government ever. That's
Okay.
how they get their tentacles in. And that's why we need to show people how it really works. Our country is being stolen right now. We are being distracted with a left right paradigm. And that left right paradigm is being driven largely by foreign actors. And this is a tragedy. We need to educate ourselves because without that education, we'll have people screaming for the murder of our prime minister. We'll have a leader in opposition or the leader of the opposition who will cry and scream about foreign interference, yet won't even go before the ethics committee to get his clearance because he is as dirty as the day is long. His wife's family are nothing but banana bankers who were raping the country of Colombia in a deal that former Prime Minister Harper set up, where they killed Colombians left, right, and center who had the audacity to ask for the ability to have clean drinking water while they were working at the mines and having the stolen wealth extracted and laundered through banks like TD. That's a deal that Stephen Harper set up, the Colombian thing, with the prime ministers Aribe and Santos, criminals and butchers who brought a terrorist organization such as the FARC, who murder children, into the government and gave them all amnesty. Because what better way to enjoy a free and just society than to bring the pimps, the thieves, the murderers, and the gangsters into the government officially? That's what we're going to face here
The
if we
Christmas
don't
parties
stop
were
it
probably
in its
pretty dope,
tracks.
though.
Look, it's
I'm just kidding. Sorry.
we have a government right now that is about to fall. Is it the best government? No, it's not. It's full of holes, their ship. But is it better than the boat that we will be on, where a woman's right to choose her body, her choice, is no longer on the table? We're going to be living in a theocracy run by oligarchs who use a book that has held down humanity since it has been written.
You're talking about
People
the
who don't
Bible.
believe in science, people who don't believe that we as a society, we don't need we don't need their God to get our salvation. What we need are things like medical science. We are standing as a species on the shoulders of giants. We are capable as human beings of living in a utopia, of being good to each other, where everyone can have. But that doesn't happen because rich men who control us, and they do it through corporations. They do it through everyday things that we take for granted. And then they institute policies that benefit their friends. It's a trickle down effect, right? Reaganomics. He pisses and it falls on your head. That's how it works. But the world is falling apart, not just economically, not just physically itself. I mean, if we don't smarten up and learn a new sustainable way of life where we don't depend on burning fossil fuels. I'm not saying it's destroying the planet completely. What I'm saying is it plays a part. We're fracking. If people know what fracking is, okay, you wouldn't drink any water out of your tap ever again.
Okay, I want to go back. I want to circle back to the left-right paradigm thing because I think that I agree with you. I think that people hear that phrase and they shrug. They know what it means, but no one really does anything about it. But I want people to understand a couple things. It is designed to make people divided and to reflexively reject arguments from the other side, even if those arguments are cogent. So one of the things I would use as an example, and if you don't like me for saying this, I think that you are part of this ecosystem, this paradigm landscape. When it came to things like the convoy, I was one of those people that was very hesitant to use a broad brush to villainize all these people that went to Ottawa. Do I think they should have blasted horns? No. Do I think that the very very anecdotal examples of Nazi paraphernalia was wrong? Of course, right? Do I think that out of all the people that were there that they were all fucking stupid or racist? No, I don't. I know progressives that went. I know progressives that went and were like, listen, I don't know how to tell you this, but like it wasn't anything like the media was telling you it was like. I'm not saying it was there weren't some bad apples there. Of course there were. But by and large, it was really just people kind of like having a good time. And whether or not you thought they were ignorant is totally irrelevant. And so, but it led to us villainizing each other even more than we were doing before the pandemic. And I found that very troubling. And when I look at someone like Zelensky, okay, we just spent a year and 4 months now or something, a year and 3 months, watching the war unfold. And it is like this man is like Jesus. You cannot criticize Zelensky. Whenever you find yourself in a pocket of time like that, where there's one person that the media is portraying as infallible, stop what you're doing, start reading stuff, and try not to just dismiss criticisms coming from the other side. Because I'll tell you something: the people that were not necessarily pro-Russia, but not at all pro-Ukraine, more like observers rather than waving pom-poms. Those people last year were talking about things like there were special op forces in Ukraine before the war started. And people were like, you're a fucking Russian plant. You're just a propagandist. And then that airman in the United States leaked all of those secret documents. And it turns out not only were there special forces inside Ukraine before the war even started, there were 51 units from 4 different countries. And 41 of those special ops units were from the United States. And nobody that called people who pointed that out last year, no one went up to those people and was like, hey, my bad, man. It looks like you were right. And that is how that paradigm cements itself forever, because no one's willing to retroactively correct themselves or to give credit to somebody. Why? Because we're so polarized that guy's the villain. So if that guy says anything that makes Russia look not completely fucking guilty of everything, then that guy must be a Russian plant. And it's really making us ignorant. It is a massive issue. And I
don't think people are ignorant. Not everybody. I think the problem is that, it's people. It's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem. The people of the Ukraine are proud people. These are people who are watching their friends, their family die. These are innocent women and children and men. These are mothers and fathers, and I've got all the support in the world for them. But they're a chess piece, and they're a chess piece for a gang of international killers and thieves who are using those tensions, taking advantage of those tensions to rev things up. That's how war starts. War is an economic driver. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And when blood is in the water, the hawks smell it. And the relationships that people in power have with defense contractors certainly doesn't help. But
Yeah.
war is good business for all sides, except for the people who have to live on the battlefield, not just the
but
combatants.
it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You know, like you can say to people, listen, I support the civilians in Ukraine. I hope that you know that the war ends. You can say all those things, and then simultaneously be like, there's a lot of issues with the Zelensky government. You know, there's a
There's a
lot
lot
of
of issues with every government.
that's what I'm saying, though.
Every government.
But people are afraid. I know that, but people are afraid. If you zone in specifically, you apparently you're not allowed to say this. Wow, Russia. Wow, Putin, that evil bastard invaded Ukraine, and then go like this. Wow, Ukraine. I really like. You know,
Putin's
I
been
hope.
dead since December, and he wasn't making any decisions since last summer. The man
But
is dead.
the point I'm trying to make, is that if we continue to have this reflex where any criticism against the quote good guys is seen as propaganda on behalf of the bad guys, well, fuck off. What's the point in even talking if that's the way that we're going to treat each other?
There are good guys, James, but the problem is the people who were elected to do their jobs are running against that wall that I described, the ingrained civil servants, the ingrained government, so to speak, and the apparatus that builds up around it, communication, comms. Do you know how easy it is simply to withhold information while you're doing your job? Nothing else, but something, a vital piece that you may come across that doesn't make its way up the chain in the ecosystem. And imagine a mass of people doing the same thing. You don't get a complete picture. That's where corruption creeps in. This is where the bribery creeps in. This is business. There are two groups right now, two. And the recent fallout between Patrick Brown and Modi, the PM, will demonstrate this. Even though they're personal friends, great friends, they had a falling out, and that's being driven by which camps they sit in. Because right now we have a full-scale war taking place between progressives and corporations. Corporations, you need to understand, are international. They don't know any borders or boundaries. And we're talking about corporate old energy guard. We're talking keeping us enslaved through oil and gas. This entire thing. Now you have other people on the other side who are swinging for green, green, green. What people don't understand is a lot of that push is coming from the same oligarchs who have the oil and gas, because what does it take to make electricity? Well, it takes coal, God damn it. Lots and lots of coal, which is the filthiest substance you can burn. What I'm saying is we have businessmen who are trying to carve us up with free thinkers, real thinkers that are out there, want us to progress past this limited way of life where we work 9 to 5, where we hate each other based on color, creed, religion, sexuality. It's a paradigm they lock us into. And people who have true beliefs, there are real conservatives, there are real liberals, there really are Democrats and Republicans. But the problem is both sides are infested with businessmen and women who could give a fuck about their party or their country.
And the quiet hypocrisy that produces. Like when, again, I'm sorry that I keep on using this as an example, but I think people have to stop waving pom-poms, okay? But because it was last year, maybe it was even longer than that. I don't remember. No, it was last September, I believe, when Joe Biden sat there and said that he was going, if Russia continues to be aggressive in Ukraine, he would take out the Nord Stream pipeline. He fucking said it. He admitted it in a press conference. And then, like 2 months later, the Nord Stream pipeline was bombed and sabotaged. And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, well, it was obviously Russia, who apparently bombed their own bank account for some stupid reason, right? And no one wanted to, and people called Seymour, I had Seymour Hersh, a fucking legendary reporter, a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter, used to be from the New Yorker, New York Times. He's like 85, I think now, or whatever. He's the one that wrote about that story. It was all over the place in Europe, but in North America, people were like, oh, what a kook. And then you had people like Justin Ling and others who were saying like, oh, well, no one takes him seriously anymore. And it's just like, shut up. Like, imagine if Putin was like this. Well, if the United States continues to supply arms to Ukraine, I am going to bomb Imperial Oil. I don't know, whatever. Like, give me an American oil company. I don't know, whatever that is. And then 2 months later, it's bombed. Imagine the media going, well, clearly it wasn't Putin who admitted that he was going to do it. Like, everyone would be like, where the fuck are we? What planet are we on?
But they think we're stupid. That's why the first thing they did was buy media.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I hate to break it to people, but I'm really sorry to tell you this. But just because Putin is evil, and he is, that doesn't mean that all of the players that represent the power structure on the other side of that war are all fucking angels who are infallible and will fucking go to heaven in bodily form because they're so great. Guys, there's no real good guys in war. There's usually just a side that's worse than the other. But it is a NATO war now. Now that we found out that 4 different countries from NATO had 51 different units of special operations happening inside Ukraine, it was a NATO war before Russia even invaded. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it's inconvenient that this has, but the reason why I'm even mentioning this is to chisel away at this idea that David you mentioned. I think it's a good point that people news, but it's still very current because no one's doing anything about that whole left-right paradigm. Our media is stuck in that left-right paradigm. Our people are, the citizens are, everybody is, and it's weaponized by the corporations and the international corporate interests.
Yep.
That help fan the flames of that division.
You know what's terrifying? I'll tell you what's terrifying. During the convoy, if you were privy to certain inside information, and we had a guy on the protection detail, so we knew what was going on. They didn't give a fuck about people honking horns and the bullshit. The problem is they really believed someone was going to take a shot at them, an actual shot, because they know their own intelligence network is riddled with filth and holes, and they can't trust it, and that people are basically fighting them tooth and nail every step of the way. That was what was going on at certain points. That's why the panic, and when provincial police, when that help was requested, well, there was no help coming from that section, and you could hardly understand why.
Tell everyone why.
Well, because the entire Ford regime was propped up and created by a foreign government, and it was done so a steady stream of highways and casinos could continue to kick off profits that could be shipped back home. That's how it works. Well, we've been bought and sold and chopped into a million pieces. The people who entrust the safety of yourself, your mothers, your fathers, your children to are corrupt. And if they're not corrupt, they're extremely incompetent and they lack a spine.
Or they're
out because of that. Because of that, we right now are on the verge of a civil war pitting Canadians. Conservatives aren't bad. Liberals aren't bad. New Democrats aren't bad. Policies that I may disagree with, that you may disagree with, and we all have a personal choice of which party we would like, but parties used to work together. They used to come together for the betterment of Canadians. And instead, we've descended into tribalism, and that tribalism is the result of the fire that has been burning and the flames that are being fanned by places like Post Media, by Fox Media, by CNN, both sides, because they're all owned by the same people.
Yeah. And people don't understand that when you're polarized and you got the left here and you got the right here and they are squished inside their boxes, corruption has a big laneway to go right through the middle.
Absolutely.
You know?
Divide and conquer. This is
Yeah.
how it's done. Invasions and the destruction of civilizations almost never happens from outside. It always starts inside their own walls. That's where you start. You eat away at the sovereignty and the security of a nation like a cancer from the inside.
Listen,
That's how guys like us, like me, you see this world, you don't believe it when you're working in it, but then you do work for basically all of them. You do work for prime ministers and presidents and vice presidents and sheikhs, and you find out that these guys who own everything, well, they're owned too. And the shit that people just don't hear about, it's terrifying.
There's a reason why many decades ago tax loopholes for the rich spread like wildfire across this planet. And it's
Absolutely.
not because they're good people.
Absolutely.
Listen, your show it's been a long time coming. But I'm kind of thinking that the timing for when it's going to launch, and that's the fix, is actually better now than it would have been last year. I think that like in a couple weeks, when you start your podcast, I'm going to be there with you, I think, for the first couple at least, right? Just to sort of like, I don't even know why.
You're the producer. You got to steer it. And at the end of the day, I was going to go ahead and do my own because Cryer's been very busy and I've been busy. So we lost communication. I was going to go ahead on my own, but Dean assured me that we've got a firm launch date in 2 weeks. We had some exciting news. We had Charles Adler added to the network, which is massive win. It's incredible. I'm looking forward to this.
As your producer,
there's some
David,
people who've helped, and I'm going to acknowledge them when the show launches, and things like this microphone and equipment, and a lot of help coming from very good people, and I appreciate it a great deal.
No worries. And as your producer, I expect to be paid in state secrets.
There you go.
All right, David Wallace.
I don't think I have anything current.
Yeah, no, I know. Thank you for joining us, man. I'll call you later on tonight, and we'll gap. Okay.
Tally ho.
Have a good one, sir. That was a fun conversation. I know I didn't expect to go to that place, but as soon as he said left-right paradigm, I get sucked in like like when a meth head finds a piece of white something on a floor with a flashlight. I'm just like right in that shit. So the fix is going to be so dope. He's probably just going to eclipse everyone on this network. Charles Adler is going to be number one for a day, and then David Wallace's podcast is going to launch. It's just going to be a juggernaut. But I'm really happy that he joined us. Tomorrow's Casual Friday. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I feel like I got to revamp Casual Friday a little bit. The viewership has gone down a couple times since the time that Starlink fucked me. And then last week, the Jenny episode, which I thought was hilarious for at least the first 45 minutes. The viewership sank. So I'm going to revamp it. I don't even know how yet, but I'll figure something out. And then, and then we'll have a show. Next week, I have Linwood Barkley. He has sold millions and millions and millions of books. He's a mystery writer, thriller writer. He's been on the show before. On the 23rd, Christine Anderson will be back. I know she's a fan favorite. I get it. So that should be fun. And I have a couple other announcements that I'll make probably closer to the date. But until then, we'll see you next time on Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed.